Hello, welcome to Talent Acquisition Trends and Strategy. I'm your host, James Mackey. Thank you for joining us today. We have a really exciting episode. We're joined by Eric Lee. Eric was the co-founder of LinkedIn and is now running another very successful company, serial entrepreneur, and he knows a hell of a lot about the talent landscape and tech. And we're going to have a really fun conversation today. So again, thanks for tuning in. And hey, by the way, if you think you'd be a good guest or know anybody who's a talent acquisition executive or CEO that really knows their stuff, please send them our way. We really appreciate it. All right, cool. So let's jump into it. Eric, welcome to the show. How you doing?
I'm doing well, James. Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's so great to have you on the show. Thank you so much for contributing to the community. And I know the topics we're going to be discussing today are going to influence talent strategy. So just before we jump into everything, would you mind sharing a brief background on a little bit about who you are? So I want everybody tuning in to understand the perspective you're coming from.
Yeah, for sure. Unlike a lot of folks in the HR world, I did not come from the HR world. I approached it from the tech world as an entrepreneur, and so my career, I've been spending most of my time building products and technologies. About 20 years ago, I was one of the co-founders of LinkedIn, and that really got me started in the people business, and it's been a passion, since then. So these days, I work, at the intersection of people and talent and technology, and build various kinds of tools and technologies to help better facilitate people to get job opportunities.
I love it. I love it. And I'm definitely excited to dive into some pretty cool stories on LinkedIn. If we could actually just, since we kind of just brought it up, I actually love it. We could just start there real quick. I wanted to see, like, when LinkedIn was initially started, what was like the mission or the goal? Like, did it like shift drastically, or is that where it is today? Is that a surprise based on how the company was founded, or is it does it track with the initial goal?
Yeah, it's tracking pretty well, honestly. I've been an entrepreneur several times over, and honestly, a lot of startups, they kind of pivot a few times until they find their true calling in life. But LinkedIn was one of those pretty rare exceptions that stayed pretty true to the original story. And so at the beginning, LinkedIn was really about trying to keep track of our networks. And so in Silicon Valley, people move jobs a lot, and you develop relationships with your coworkers, and then they go off to some other startup or some other company, and it'd be great to keep track of them, such that if you start your next startup and you want to pull them back in to work with you again and be colleagues, it'd be good to know where they are. And so LinkedIn was a way to keep track of our networks, and fortunately, it seemed like a lot of folks were interested in that problem too, having it solved. That was definitely part of the reason why I think LinkedIn became pretty successful.
Yeah, I'm sure. And there's so many reasons. It's like, what's really been fascinating to me is that it's been a huge revenue driver for my company, SecureVision, as well. Like, I mean, and even like several years ago, before, I feel like a lot more people are producing content on LinkedIn now. However, like I was posting content like 5 years ago, and we were pulling in customers through talking about our services and posting and adding value. Like, there was a point, I think, in like 2017 or 16, where we were pulling in like 5 to 10 customers a month. And basically our whole strategy was centered around like LinkedIn. And it was wild. And it's so weird because it's like such a core part of our founding story and where we are today. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great story, James, and heard lots of examples of successes through the years. And every time I hear about one of these stories of how someone was able to leverage LinkedIn successfully, it really is heartening to hear about those stories. All those hard nights and weekends building the platform seem to make a difference for people out there.
For sure. And so I would love to, if you have any fun stories or lessons learned from the LinkedIn days? I think that's just a million different directions we can go, but I'd love to just hear a little bit about, in the early days, what you were working on and what you learned from it. I think that would be immensely valuable for everybody tuning in, if you could share.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many stories. I think one of them that we I think sort of figured out at the beginning was what kind of social platform we wanted to be. So LinkedIn got started at around the same time that platforms like Twitter and Facebook, was started as well. And so, as everybody knows, those became truly like social platforms where people could share anything, about what they were doing with their friends and family, and um, things like that. And so there was a real question that we had at LinkedIn, like, hey, should we do that too? Because it seems like it's working with other platforms. We're doing this, seemingly boring stuff here in terms of catering to professionals. Should we, branch out? And we even saw some platforms that try to straddle, between professional and personal activities and purposes. And ultimately we decided, we should just stick with the professional side of things and really do a good job there. And I'm glad we made that decision back then, because I think, some of the experiences that you relay, in terms of just, being a meaningful platform for professionals to interact, was really, a result of that early decision. So I'm glad we did that.
Was LinkedIn your first company?
It was not. It was,
Okay.
who's counting, I guess, but it was the third, I believe.
Yeah.
Which means that there were other companies that were not as successful as LinkedIn, but
Right.
you learn a lot through each of those experiences, and hopefully, you do the kinds of things, or rather you avoid doing certain things that are gonna be dangerous, for the company. And eventually, the combination of the experience plus a lot of luck, I have to say,
Mhm.
results in a success. So we were very lucky, as well as at LinkedIn.
Yeah, it's just been incredible, and just to see the rollout, like the recruiter functionality. We have a ton of LinkedIn like professional recruiter licenses through LinkedIn, and I know that our finance leader starts to sweat a little bit every time we get the bill. But I mean, it's like we couldn't operate without it. It's like such a sometimes we're like, damn, we're spending a lot of money with LinkedIn, and then I'm like, well, yeah, because it's like we use it every day. My recruiters are on it for hours every single day. So it's just a core part of how we operate our solution and deliver our solution to customers. It's wild. And it's funny too. It's like in tech, most of the hires that we make for our customers are through outbound LinkedIn messaging. Like the different job boards just don't really work for us. And like at least startup growth stage tech, like we're not pulling in any hires from like all the big old school job boards that I'm not going to name names necessarily, but we've had success with LinkedIn job postings, but we're not really seeing success on other channels. So it's most of the time our recruiters are just like sending messages to folks. Like that's how we're acquiring customers. That's how we're getting candidates in our clients' pipelines. It's pretty much everything at this point. It's
Yeah,
pretty
I think one of the reasons why LinkedIn has quality professionals on it is because it strives to be a place of engagement. So compared to like a job board that you're only there because you're an active candidate looking for work, and then in between that, you'd have no reason to show up. You can imagine that it's hard to kind of pull in engagement. So
yeah,
LinkedIn, has all sorts of mechanisms to try to bring people in and continue to keep them engaged in between job
for
searches.
sure. It's also cool to see like the content shifting over the past few years where it is getting a little bit more personal and I don't know, just less like formal in a sense. Like it's still professional, but it's nice to see people sharing more about themselves, and it's kind of been interesting to see that evolution in terms of how people are leveraging the site, going from this is my professional image, whatever that means, to more so like, hey, let me share a little bit about myself and you know, be a little bit vulnerable, and that's actually going to help my professional career, uh, obviously to the right extent, right? But I think that that's really been an interesting thing for me to see as well. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully it's the platform is like a mirror of what goes on in professional life and professional networking. For the longest time we try to build kind of a digital version of networking with LinkedIn, and it's good to see some of these practices in real life translate into the digital world, where when you're at an event or something like that, you definitely tend to share aspects of your personal life with others, and so that
Right.
helps build those relationships and helps to build trust, and that hopefully is conducive towards better professional relationships.
Yeah, it's so wild. Like now it's like nowadays, like I go to conferences or whatever, and it's like, oh, you look so familiar. It's like, oh, okay, I've been seeing you on LinkedIn for the last like 5 years, right? It's it's
Especially with the remote work, and not only applies to people outside of your company, but also your colleagues too, right?
yeah. There's a sales advisor. I believe, I don't know if that's like what he calls himself, but his name is Sam Nelson, and he was like a very successful SDR leader, and he posts a lot of content on LinkedIn, and he has blue hair. He has blue hair, and it's great because he has a great online brand. And whenever he goes in person, so he's like a celebrity. Everybody instantly recognizes him, and I was like, damn, maybe I should like dye my hair like purple or something. I don't know. And then just post it all over LinkedIn, and it's just like, at that point you're just, everyone's gonna know who you are. I don't, have you ever, would you ever do that? Do you think you would do that?
I have to say I haven't thought about that particular idea, James, but maybe there's something else
Yeah.
that sets me apart.
Whatever creates demand for our businesses, whatever it takes, right?
There
uh
you go. There you go.
well, so hey, tell me about, like, so KarmaCheck. I'm really excited to learn about the business you're building right now. Could you give us a little bit of insight as to why you started the company? What's the future, the problem that you're solving, and why is your team well positioned to help solve that problem? I just would love to get kind of the overview, if you will.
Yeah. So, in a way, KarmaCheck, the story really begins with where LinkedIn, leaves off. So, several years ago, I became very interested in this idea of, trust and how we can create more trust in digital worlds. There's a lot of reasons for doing that, but I was looking for the blue check mark that could go next to LinkedIn profiles and other profiles online. And I found the background check space, which I felt, hey, there could be a lot of innovation here, actually. This is background checks are an activity that businesses and employers do pretty much ubiquitously. Every employer uses it in some form or fashion, and yet it's been done the same way, over and over again, through the decades. And with our perspective in terms of how we can really take modern technology and modern use of data and provide a much faster experience, a much better experience for the candidate. It's sort of one of the first touch points that they have with their employer, so might as well make it great. And
Right.
yeah, and so we decided that there were lots of things that could be improved about it, and so we just went off and did it. And or I should say we're doing it. There's a lot of companies that are in the space that haven't necessarily innovated a lot, over
Right.
the years, and so we are kind of a fresh breeze blowing through the industry right now.
So what's like, so these are, it's primarily efficiency gaps, right? Like there's just a lot of ways to make it more efficient, the whole process more. Is that basically the primary value proposition? Is it like removes friction from the process? Um, and
Yeah,
if okay, that's accurate.
yeah. I mean, background checks are part of onboarding process, and we know how important it is for candidates to get through uh, the onboarding process. We um, really support staffing companies and contingent workforces these days. So there's a desire to move talent ever faster through those processes,
Mm,
and not lose a candidate, and also even have the candidate have a pleasant experience. And so
gotcha.
to the extent that we can really help with turnaround times, reducing drop-offs, those are some of the key things that we focus on improving. Um, then it's a win for employers because they're able to be more competitive with what is admittedly a demanding talent market, kind of across many industries, and they're able to place people faster, which in general either means that they're able to realize the productivity of those individuals sooner, or if they're a staffing company, they're able to create revenue for their business faster. So there's some real concrete business benefits to having a faster process through the background check experience.
Gotcha. And so it sounds like your customers a lot. It sounds like recruiting agencies. Is that right?
Yeah,
Okay.
recruiting agencies, staffing agencies. Yeah,
But what about like software companies, like startups, growth stage, SaaS
yeah.
companies? Are
So
they also?
software companies, it comes in two forms. First of all, there's corporate hiring. Companies, a tech company hiring full-time workers. Oftentimes they'll run background checks, and we can do that for them very quickly and seamlessly. But what's interesting is that there are a lot of tech companies that are like talent marketplaces in themselves. They provide a platform to a certain industry that really tries to match candidates with other employers who want to hire those candidates. And so there, it's kind of a new generation of a staffing activity mediated by technology. And so the need for speed is also there.
Yeah.
So we serve that function pretty well as well.
I love it. I love it. So the one thing just to pivot a little bit, so your company did a recent study, right, on a state of hiring and recruiting.
Yep.
And from what I can see here in our notes, talks a little bit about missing goals and the impact of burnout. Can you give us an overview of the study and the focus and the results? What did you find out?
Yeah. So the survey was really, around, how, HR organizations and recruiters, deal with technology, how well they're leveraging technology, these days. And so, what we basically found is that, yes, there are a lot of organizations that, use technology, but there's really ample opportunity to use, technology a whole lot better, shall we say, right? The implementations and the deployments are still, kind of on the way to, fully realizing their benefits. And so things change as the overall economy, changes. When everything was booming, you know, all the messages were, hey, let's bring in those people and candidates as quickly as we can. Nowadays, there's a lot more focus on controlling costs and, making sure that, every candidate that is brought into the door, makes it to a placement, and is, a quality candidate, from the client standpoint, at least with respect to a staffing company. And so, we see that there continues to be new tools that can invented all the time in HR, tech, and the opportunity to leverage those tools. So it must be kind of, bewildering sometimes to know what's out there and to be able to take advantage of the latest tools and technologies because there's so much innovation going on.
There is, and I think though, I think one thing that I see, and I see a lot of services companies do on the agency side is that they want to put together a differentiator, or they want to increase valuation. So they end up trying to build like an in-house product too. And I just think that 9 times out of 10, that's a terrible idea because one, the executive team, they're services leaders, like they don't know how to build successful products or software companies. It's a totally different motion, right? Two, it dilutes focus, right? Like do what you're good at, and complexity is the enemy of scale, right? So the more straightforward what you're building is, the easier it's going to be to grow. And the reality is like you don't have the same resources, right? Like it's a software company is going to have like the VC funding probably, and is going to build a superior product. And you're not even really building a differentiator because anybody can license these tools. Like if somebody were to try to build like a couple of features that LinkedIn may have or something, it's not, you don't have proprietary tech. Okay, you've built this in-house tech. It's probably not going to work as well as a category and leading technology company will work. So, I mean, I'm a huge advocate for robust tech stacks. And I think for talent acquisition, and I always say like, the best talent acquisition organizations are run like revenue organizations. And it's been really interesting to see the robustness of how robust revenue teams operate at this point in time with their tech stacks, with Salesforce and sales enablement and Gong and all of these tools that are optimized and integrated, and the reporting and just the data driven approach. And then you look at a lot of companies' talent acquisition process, and it's like, and they have like one applicant tracking system that isn't even set up right, and they have like no tech stack. And so I'm not saying a lot of companies operate that, but well, actually I am saying that a lot of companies operate. There are some that they get it right, but it's just interesting to see that dynamic in talent acquisition. There's still such a huge knowledge gap and understanding of how talent acquisition should really be operating effectively. And I think you're right. Like there are a lot of tools out there. I'm not impressed with a lot of the products and talent acquisition HR. Like I'm really not. But I'd be curious to get your thoughts on if there's any specific either companies, products that you're interested in, or if you don't want to name specific product, like companies, like just different functionality, like what type of technology do you think talent acquisition departments should be leveraging right now?
Yeah, I mean, those are all great points, James. And I first of all, I agree with a lot of those. So just like for us, we're not necessarily experts in staffing, but we are experts in tech. We outsource staffing to others, and so I think there's definitely a place for vice versa as well. There's so much innovation these days that's happening in HR, tech. Honestly, we thought that, after we built LinkedIn, job's done. But it turns out that there's, even more, surface area to kind of innovate on as a result of, companies like LinkedIn and others to keep growing and, do better in terms of, acquiring talent and moving them through the funnel. I'm really intrigued, these days about the kind of the chat bots
Mm.
that are put, in front to help help candidates get answers, to opportunities and help them on board. I think that's pretty cool there in terms of making that process more efficient. It's interesting. It's an interplay between personalized service and also having humans that are recruiters that are been part of the process, but how do you scale that? And chatbots, to the extent that they can do well, can really help scale and personalize that experience. So we're seeing some companies that are, I think, doing some really good work in that area.
Yeah, I think so. It's if you can automate as much of the top of the funnel as you can, it allows the recruiters to focus on candidates that are further down funnel and really focus on the relationship aspect more versus doing simple tasks that are happening in a large amount of volume with candidates that may or may not even be interested. At that stage, they're not even the equivalent on the revenue side would be like they're not even qualified pipeline. Like they're still a potentially a lead. And I think we have to look at it from that perspective of like, I sort of see businesses as like two big demand gen funnels. And like one funnel is for customer acquisition and one is for talent acquisition. And our goal as CEOs in our case is to optimize both of those funnels, right? And everything that goes into that. So I think that's just an interesting view to see it from. But yeah, I see the top of the funnel being a great place for innovation. And I would agree with you, like to the extent that people can not have to do that and only engage with people that they know are interested is going to create, it's such a huge efficiency gain. I guess like one question I had would just be like, with technology advancements and AI and whatnot, what do you think the role of the recruiter is going to be? Like, how is this going to impact like recruiter headcount, right? Like, are we going to see like fewer recruiters on a team, or are they going to be able to manage more roles? Or I mean, I think it's at this point, services still drives recruitment. Like having a real person driving the hire is still critically important. Like a product hasn't been able to replace that. But I'm curious to get your thoughts. If do you have thoughts on, you know, 5, 10, 20 years from now, is it still going to be people driven, where it's like a hands-on person that's driving the process forward and helping somebody get hired, or is it primarily going to be tech, right?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I really, believe that, for ever and ever, there's going to be a role for human, interactions and recruiters. Yeah, I think what tech is doing is really, taking away, a lot of the drudgery that recruiters have to, do, collect forms, ask, assess, assessments. A lot of those things can be, automated now, such that, the recruiters can really provide that, personal touch, and that differentiation between, one company to another, that, would really matter to the candidate. So, what I see for the future of recruiters is that, I don't think they will necessarily, reduce in number or, become extinct, but they will be able to have a more interesting job where they're
Mm.
talking, to candidates about things that, technology doesn't, cover. Maybe, explaining why, a certain, company is good. Maybe doing some really, great matching between the candidate and the employer, especially when maybe there's not exactly a, perfect fit, but, really kind of working from both sides to, make sure there's a good, match and opportunity for both sides. So I think things like that, really require the human touch will always be there.
For sure. Also, I want to talk to you a little bit about ChatGPT. If we could cover that real quick, I would be kind of curious. Like, I'm trying to think through all the different applications that are going to happen within talent acquisition with a tool like ChatGPT. And I was
Yeah.
wondering, like, if you have any specific thoughts on how that's going to impact our industry.
Well, ChatGPT is a really exciting technology. People have been reading a lot about it in the press, and so for those who don't know, it's briefly, an AI that has essentially scanned a very large corpus of information, generated by humans, and can basically, answer questions or provide essays on any number of topics, including writing code, which is really impressive.
That is
Uh,
really cool.
yeah, but I think the opportunity, there is, to um, really, use that technology to focus in on a certain domain and to really be an automated digital expert in a way that can help ease the recruiting process. So again, getting questions from candidates, answering intelligently, until such point where it can no longer, and it makes sense to go to like a human recruiter to get more advanced questions answered. I think there's definitely a role in ChatGPT to adapt to domains like that and to really help with the recruiting process.
Yeah, it'll be really interesting, and that's I've been thinking a lot about different applications and whatnot. One thing that I hadn't initially thought about, but I want to learn more about is from a copyright perspective. I don't know if do you know how that works exactly? Like if content's created by GPT, like does that mean OpenAI, or I think it's OpenAI? Like, do they own the content, or how does that work? Do you know how that works by any chance? I don't.
I think we're at the cusp of understanding how this is supposed to work.
I don't.
I've,
Yeah, maybe
I've
nobody
I've read the
understands.
same
Like,
articles as well.
yeah,
Yeah, and there's questions about the content that Chat GPT produces. Who owns that? If it's citing information, off of some original source, does it, have the copyright or do those original sources have the copyright. So I think we're definitely entering some new territory here, and
Yeah.
I think people are definitely trying to figure it out.
Yeah. So one thing I did, and there's different situations, right? Like if you're, as you said, it's scraping information from the web, then yeah, the original sources of that information would have, I suppose, ownership potentially. One thing that I did is I tried this as an experiment. It was all right. I didn't end up really using it, but I using the content, but I took 10 LinkedIn posts that I have that I made. I copy and pasted all of them into ChatGPT, and then I said, put this in a format, a script format that I can record for a solo episode for my podcast. And I just wanted to see how it would break it up in segments and the flow. It was all right. I would say it was like a good like second draft, right? And then I would have had to done final edits. But I mean, in that way, it's like it was pulling directly from my content versus like the web, I guess. I don't know if it still somehow references like other stuff outside of my content, but there's just like interesting things like that too, which I'm kind of toying with the tool and seeing how it works. It's pretty cool though. It's fun.
I think that what is good right now about the technology is that it is really good to use it to create like a first draft, or maybe as you
Mhm.
said, a second draft, right? It's a start of some piece of content you might want to publish, but definitely human eyes are still good to look at that information, confirm that it's in fact factually correct, and make any improvements on it. Maybe with time it'll get better, but I still feel like in the long run even it's going to take humans to kind of curate that content and before it's publishable.
Yeah, I think it also helps like create templates like potentially for messaging for recruiters. Like I could say like, okay, when we do our out messaging to candidates, we need to cover this, 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 and this. Like create 4 templates for me for messaging, or create a 4-step follow-up cadence. And then using that as like the brainstorming activity, which you can of course edit. But I could see it impacting talent acquisition that way as well.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea, and I'm sure some recruiters are already doing it,
Yeah.
and I bet they're doing it pretty effectively. Yeah, it becomes an interesting question, right? Whether a candidate or anybody will be able to tell, the difference between what's been generated by ChatGPT and what comes from a
Right.
real
And
human.
I think they're coming out with different products now, right? Or there's a rush to create, and there might already be stuff. I think maybe Google has something that can basically tell with a reasonably high level of certainty if text was created by ChatGPT or by a person. Have you heard of this?
I haven't investigated those methods myself, but
Yeah.
they are creating tests to, differentiate the source.
Yeah, I would love to if just at some point if you have a chance to read up to it, I'd love to pick your brain on that. Just coming, from a technical background, your understanding of that, because that'd be really cool to know. It's a really interesting topic, and I think I think like answering questions for candidates. I think just given how important messaging is, positioning is, um, optimizing and putting together different templates for messaging, maybe even giving like some brainstorming ideas on how to pitch companies, right? Like how to to sell, like put together a coherent value proposition that makes sense. And then another thing I was thinking like is like segmenting by like essentially buyer personas. Like when you get on a call with a candidate, like one of the things that like when I was hands on, I would really do is I try to understand like what they value, like, what do they really care about? And they have 4 kids, so benefits is top of mind, or they're just really ambitious and want to move up to their career as much as possible, or they value remote. I mean, different people value different stuff, right? And then how I would describe the company would be based on what matters to them. Like something might be important to me, but it doesn't mean that they care. So I could be talking about something that I think is really cool, why I joined the company, but they might join for a completely different reason that's just as valid. It's just so it's like knowing that. And so I think what would also be interesting with ChatGPT is to say, okay, how would you position the company to somebody who values this, values that, and just basically create a list of like templates for like different essentially buyer personas, if you will. So
Right.
just like the whole content piece, I think is really fascinating. The different applications that we could probably get creative and get some real value from. So
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think in the realm of, content generation and, messaging, there's probably lots of different ways that uh, ChatGPT is going to get used, and it's going to get better, right? Like right now, I think one of the problems is really around accuracy, factual accuracy, and it's so believable when it's false, that's what
right.
concerns a lot of people. I think uh, there's been some bans in certain countries already around ChatGPT just because of kind of the potential dangers around the technology.
Oh yeah, like it makes big mistakes. Like I'm into philosophy and I asked like uh ChatGPT like who are the top 10 most influential philosophers. And literally it came up with only 10 Western philosophers, no Eastern philosophers, which are like the oldest, like some of the most impactful philosophers in the world, no Eastern philosophers. And so I asked it, I was like, how come you only mention Western philosophers? And ChatGPT was just like, I'm sorry. I overlooked that. I'm like, are you kidding me? So it's still, yeah, it does. It's, you still see like that kind of dopey stuff happening. And so you're right. Like it's, everybody should be fact checking. And that's where it's like, I mean, I guess you can use it for research, but more so using it as like a brainstorming thing as a starting point, but like a high level of skepticism and just it shouldn't be, it's not doing the thinking for you. Like, you know what I mean? Like you have to be thoughtful about what you're reading and actually verify, right? So
Yeah, I think that I think one of the things to realize about the technology is that um there's actually no like real understanding behind this text that it generates. Like it's all based on pattern recognition, to some extent. It's kind of regurgitating in a rather sophisticated way, things that have been said before, right? And so in terms of intent, um, that's the one thing that humans still have. They intend to say something or to do something. And usually there's a clarity to that output. But ChatGPT is just regurgitating things that have been said before, um,
yeah, for sure, for sure.
mindlessly. And I think that's a really apt term in this case.
Yeah, it's just it's interesting, right? Because like when it initially came out, I just I don't know, I didn't know a ton about the technology, and I mean I knew sort of like what it was doing, but I was wondering like, is this really going to change the way business is done? Like, is this just a lot of hype, and or is this really like a meaningful technology that's going to change the world? And I spoke with a few folks about this, and there seems to be a consensus amongst some very successful folks that I know in tech that do believe that this is going to be massive. I'm kind of curious to get your thoughts. Do you feel like this is a real game changer, or do you feel like there's a little bit more hype than there really should be? What do you think?
Well, there's definitely a mix of hype, but there's also a very heavy dose of realism. The technology that ChatGPT is based on. I mean, deep learning, at scale, very massive scale, has been around for decades. Ever since the beginning of the field of artificial intelligence. So there's been lots of multiple decades of research into it. So there's a lot there, and I think there is an opportunity for it to improve, especially around the accuracy scales
Hmm.
um, over the next few years. Hopefully, as more and more people use it, it's going to get better
What
as
do you
well.
think like the tipping point was? Like why all of a sudden is it seems to be exponentially better than maybe it was leading up to this point? Like it does seem like, I know you said it's been around for a long time, but it seems like from what I don't, people seem kind of surprised and impressed. So it seems like it's made a big leap, right? Is that, would you say
Yeah,
that?
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the scale really hit critical mass because of the availability of compute power to really, have a machine basically analyze and read through, all of this content that's been generated by, humans across so many different subjects. And that computing power has not been available until, the last few years. And so that's what has made AI, very interesting. The concepts have been relatively similar for 20, 30 years now. But when you apply a lot of compute power and the ability to absorb and process massive amounts of information, you start to get these kind of emergent behaviors like seeming intelligence about just about any topic.
Right.
And so that's what we're seeing right now. And there's no reason to believe that these the data associated with training these models can't get larger, and therefore making the output from these systems even seem more intelligent, or hopefully more accurate.
Right. Yeah. Really cool stuff. Well, look, Eric, we're coming up on time here. This has been a really insightful conversation. I appreciate you sharing some lessons learned from LinkedIn and what you're doing with your current business. I want to, before we jump off, if folks want to engage with you or KarmaCheck, what's the best way to get in contact?
Well, find us on our website, karmacheck.com. There's numerous ways to get in touch with me and us, and of course I'm on LinkedIn as well, so you can connect with me and reach out to me there.
I guess it would be pretty weird if you didn't have a LinkedIn. I
It
mean,
would be, and
yeah.
thankfully I have it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, hey, look, everybody tuning in. We really appreciate you joining us today, Eric. Thank you for contributing to the community, and we'd love to have you back on sometime soon.
Thanks, James. It went by fast, which means it was really fun. So thanks for having me.
It really did. It flew by. I can't believe we've been on the phone for an hour, or on the Zoom for an hour. That's
Yes.
nuts. All right. Well, hey, everybody tuning in. Thank you so much, and we will see you next Tuesday at 5 a.m. Eastern. Take care.